properly the words of Rajinder Singh for morning breakfast hour from the sandesh, September 2010. The topic is how to attain mastery, to be mastery in anything. This is supposed to be read under the Brooklyn Bridge. A researcher asked to find out what made someone an expert in a particular field as opposed to someone who was average. And looking at people who were so successful that they were recognized as experts in their fields, the researcher found some common threads. What they shared was amount of time they spent in perfecting themselves in their field. After studying these experts' lives, the researcher came up with a figure of 10,000 hours. That translates into about all 24 hours a day for 416 days. But no one can work 24 hours a day. If someone put in 8 hours a day, they could achieve the goal in 1,264 days. Or about 3.5 years. But since most people have a job and then they may only be able to put in 4 hours a day to perfect their skill, which means it would take about 7 years. If someone were to put in 2.5 hours a day practicing or working at their skill, it would take 10 years. So
that's why I said most of the big projects take 10 years.
Takes 2.5 hours of meditation a day. Would really take 10 years, and 7 if you do 4. In this study, the researcher observed sports figures. They would come in and practice from early morning until late at night. They would they would get to practice before other players and would be the last ones to leave. They would practice on the weekends and after school or work. They would visualize themselves winning. They would exercise and eat the right foods to be in the best possible shape for their sports. Most sports figures reach the prime when younger and stronger, so they may not have 10 years to reach their goal, as their effectiveness may decline with age in a particular sport. Thus, they would spend countless hours up front to reach their goal quicker. Some people even start perfecting their talents as children. When we look at some of the gold medal winners, we find they practice sometimes 5 days a week for 4 hours each day after school. Their entire vacations were spent practicing at various sports camps so they could use every possible moment to beat their competition. The researchers also study musicians. People think that the popular musical rock group called the Beatles was an overnight success. But in looking at how much time they put in, we find that they sometimes played in a music club for 8 hours a day after day after day. They put in many hours of hard work for achieving fame. In fact, one club in Germany required them to play 8 hours a day for 7 days a week. On one visit to that club, they played 106 nights for 5 or more hours a night. On their second visit, they played there 92 times. On the third visit, they played 48 times for a total of 172 hours on stage. In total, they performed there 270 nights in 1.5 years. Before they became famous, they had performed over 1,200 times of multiple hours per night. It was 7 years before they arrived in America, and 10 years of playing until their first big album came out. It took 10 years. In other words, by the time they were recognized, they had put in thousands of hours without much pay or recognition. They were not easy. It was not easy to stand and play an instrument and sing for hours and hours, day after day, but they did it. The hard work made them better and better until they became a sensation. People are, the Beatles.
Practice so much before they came.
I didn't know they had to play that much.
I don't know. I didn't know they practiced so much before they came to America.
Dear, they may have
Totally
practiced
new.
even more. That's how much they had to perform before they're known. People are well known in the technical field who make an impact started in their youth working on computers. They spent hours and hours learning how computers work, inventing and testing new ideas, then coming out with software. Are they talking about my alias? Or talking about Bill Gates or Berners-Lee or Steve Gates? Or who are they talking about? How come I'm not famous? I didn't work on any of these things. I did work on them. I played music and worked on computers. And I practiced sports and I meditated. This took hours and hours of work. When we look at students, we find that those who end up with the top grades, getting the highest test scores, and winning scholarships are those who put in hours of study. Remember, my sister Alice used to get up at 5 a.m. in high school to study. She became salutatorian and went on to Harvard for her PhD and got a lifetime 4.0. If we look at the variations,
And she had children.
if we look at the variations in test scores in nations around the world, we find that in some countries there is an emphasis on study. The parents that there is a very large population, only a small number of seats in the universities. The pressure is on children. They have tiger moms who push their kids from an early age to be the best in their studies. For them, it is a matter of their entire future, because if they do not get into a good college, they have less chance of getting jobs. That's frightening. They should get a PhD in meditation.
I think all that disappoints somebody. Disappoint me.
Well, they have the new colleges have a prerequisite in advanced meditation.
That's very disappointing.
Ultra advanced meditation.
Yeah, do nothing. That sounds better.
They have a PhD in doing nothing now, where you sit and do meditation.
Yeah, meditation been about.
There's a story of Jesus with Mary and Martha, and so Mary is cooking the food, and Mary Magdalene is in meditation. See, and
no, one is listening.
Martha's
to
cooking.
Jesus talk.
In Luke.
And the other looks after the visitors.
No, dear. Martha's doing all the cooking and all the work in the kitchen, and she says, "How come Mary Magdalene doesn't help me?"
Yeah.
And Jesus says she's doing more important work.
To do the same thing.
She's doing more important work than you meditating.
No, she was listening to his talk. He was
You
in
should
the house
not
talking to people.
Disrupt her while she's in meditation. The parents make their children study for hours. The children, it's saying that contemplation is important. The children came home from school and study for hours each night, and often study on Saturdays or on their days off. It is no wonder that they are the ones winning competitions and scholarships compared to many other nations of the world. He doesn't identify Asian countries, does he? He just says some places. He's not the side taker. Sant Kirpal Singh Maharaj used to use the example of a wrestler. He often told the story of a wrestler, how he would go out every night in the cold weather and practice. It was this nightly practice that made the wrestler successful. The wrestler did not become skilled overnight. He spent hours and hours practicing. Think about people in your field. Remember, he was way ahead of his time, because people now, they dip themselves in ice and take cold showers and take deep swims and they act like polar bears and jump in the cold water, and then they jump in the hot water. Meditation is no different. If we look at the figure of 10,000 hours, how many hours have I meditated? 10,000 there's no I, so I can't say now that I've achieved not existing. I have no hours. So you can't brag about your achievement because you cease to exist once you reach a certain number of hours. Okay, figure of 10,000 hours, we can compare that to how much time we have put into our meditation. It may not be possible to meditate 24 hours straight over a year, and because of work commitments, it may not be possible to put in 8 hours a day for 3 years. What may be possible, though, is if one is working full-time, is 4 hours a day for 7 years. But if we look at the original required minimum of at least 2.5 hours daily, that means a progress in 10 years. Basically, you can do it in 10 years. But then after 10 years, you realize you didn't meditate accurately during those 10 years, and then you have to start another 10 years again and start over. So it takes 20 years after you realize you didn't meditate correctly. Many people say they have been meditating for 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years, and still have not achieved their goal. Let us look at whether we actually have put in 2.5 hours a day, every day of the week, straight for 10 years. Like you say, like I've been drinking tea and coffee and reading books, and I wasn't meditating, right? So how many hours did I really put in? Yeah, you cheated and you didn't meditate accurately, so you're gonna have to start over. 30 years, or did we only meditate 2.5 hours once or twice a week, or even once or twice a month? Or maybe we only put in 10 minutes a day here and there. Maybe we went weeks without meditating. If we kept a diary on the amount of time we put in for meditation and added up, would we really have reached 10,000 hours within 10 or 20 or 30 years? Or are we only fooling ourselves? Do you think we just fooled ourselves? We're a fool. We're reading this because we may be fools.
Everything is so highly competitive. Even the master is so competitive.
You fooled yourself and you think you meditated all that time, but
Teacher wants to put 10,000 hours in your school.
I have to like start over again.
10,000 hours in meditation. The job they want to put 10,000 hours.
The reader is a fool. But by reading this, I could become less of a fool. We may feel good to think we meditate more than we do, but we are only fooling ourselves.